Christmas Eve is supposed to feel warm, safe. A day where families gather, where lights glow softly in the windows, and where the world pauses just long enough to breathe. But in Modesto, California, on December 24, 2002, one home went silent. A 27-year-old pregnant woman, Laci Peterson, vanished without a sound. No break-in. No scream. No struggle. Just gone. And standing at the center of the story, like a man rehearsing grief in front of an audience, was her husband, Scott Peterson. Handsome. Charming. A man who looked like he stepped out of a magazine. A man the public wanted to trust. Until they couldn't. Because as Christmas lights flickered across the neighborhood, Scott Peterson told a story. A story police quickly began to realize made no sense. And what began as a missing person search would slowly twist into one of the most haunting murder mysteries in American history. Scott tells police the morning started like any other. He says Laci was alive, smiling, getting ready to walk the dog. He says he kissed her goodbye and headed out alone to go fishing on Christmas Eve, even though it was cold, quiet, and he wasn't an avid fisherman. On paper, it sounds simple. But simple stories fall apart fastest. Neighbors said they never saw Laci walking the dog. But the dog was found wandering the neighborhood, leash still attached. A small detail, but the kind that makes investigators stop breathing for a moment. Inside the house, nothing looked out of place. No sign of struggle. No forced entry. No sign Laci had planned to leave. But one thing did stand out. Scott Peterson didn't seem afraid. He wasn't frantic. He wasn't desperate. He wasn't running door to door shouting her name. He was calm, unnervingly calm, for a man whose wife, 8 months pregnant, had just vanished. And while police were still searching bushes, alleys, and lakes, Scott Peterson was already telling friends, "It'll turn out fine." People don't talk like that when the person they love disappears. As detectives retraced Scott's steps, the story he told them kept shifting. He first said he went golfing. Then suddenly it was fishing. He said he drove to Berkeley Marina. But his alibi placed him in an area where no one saw him launch a boat. No ticket stubs. No eyewitnesses. No proof he ever touched the water that day. And then came the first big crack. Scott had told police he spent the morning watching the Discovery Channel. But detectives pulled the cable logs. The channel he named wasn't airing the show he claimed. Not even close. It was a small lie. A stupid lie. But footprints of guilt are usually small at first. Behind the scenes, investigators were already whispering the same question. Why would Scott Peterson need an alibi that precise? For a wife who had only been missing a few hours. Most husbands cling to hope. Scott clung to his story. And with every hour that passed, that story felt less like memory, and more like a script he had rehearsed. On January 24th, a month after Laci vanished, a woman walked into the Modesto Police Department. Her name was Amber Fry. She wasn't a neighbor. She wasn't a friend of the family. She wasn't even connected to Laci at all. She was Scott Peterson's secret girlfriend. Amber tells detectives something that makes every officer in the room go still. Scott told her he wasn't married. He told her he'd lost his wife. And he told her that before Laci ever went missing. The lie is nuclear. It explodes the entire case. Detectives quickly realize this isn't just infidelity, this is a motive. Amber shares voicemails, phone calls, stories Scott told her about grieving the loss of his wife. All while the real Laci was very much still alive. Worst of all, Scott called Amber on Christmas Eve, the very day Laci disappeared, and told her he was in Paris, watching fireworks on New Year's Eve. He said this while police were dragging search dogs through rivers. While volunteers were stapling missing person flyers. While Laci's family was breaking apart under the weight of terror. The world didn't know it yet. But Amber Fry had just become the key witness in a murder case. And Scott Peterson had just become the prime suspect. The moment Amber Fry goes public, Scott's carefully controlled mask begins to slip. To the media, he tries to play the grieving husband, soft voice, folded hands, eyes lowered. But to investigators, he's becoming harder and harder to understand. He avoids searches. He avoids interviews. He avoids emotion. When the community gathers to pass out flyers, Scott doesn't lead the effort. He stands off to the side, detached, watching others fight for the wife he claims to love. Laci's family begins noticing it too. While Laci's mother is barely sleeping, barely eating, begging for answers, Scott is talking casually about moving forward. He buys new things. He eats out. He even tries to sell Laci's car. People around him whisper the same question. What kind of husband behaves like this? But the darkest sign comes from Scott himself. Instead of protecting Laci's memory, he's protecting something else. Something he can't afford to lose. His freedom. He starts using a burner phone. He avoids his own family. He begins talking like a man trying to rearrange his life, not repair it. And investigators, now watching him closely, write the same line in their reports. He seems more worried about himself than his missing wife. Scott Peterson isn't acting guilty. He's acting finished. Like the life he shared with Laci ended long before she disappeared. These stories take a lot of work to put together. We dig through old files, interviews, documentaries, all of it, just to bring you the most cinematic and accurate cases possible. If you'd like to support the channel, you can now use Super Thanks or Super Chat. Even $1 million helps. No, I'm kidding. Even $1 means a lot. Alright. Let's get back to the story. By April 2003, nearly 4 months have passed. Hope is thinning. Search teams have combed fields, rivers, alleys, and neighborhoods, but the world is still holding its breath. Then the San Francisco Bay shifts. A couple walking their dog along the shoreline finds the body of a newborn baby, later confirmed to be Connor, Laci's unborn son. The next day, the tide reveals a second body. A woman, terribly decomposed, missing her head, hands, and most of her legs. DNA confirms the truth everyone feared. It's Laci. She had been placed in the very place Scott claimed he went fishing on Christmas Eve. Not near the marina. Not near the edge. But in the exact current patterns where experts said a weighted body would eventually resurface. The evidence is devastating. Not because it's dramatic, but because it fits too perfectly. Investigators now believe Laci was murdered at home. Her body transported in Scott's small fishing boat. And dumped quietly into dark water. While the rest of the world prepared for Christmas morning. The timing. The location. The lies. All of it aligns like puzzle pieces Scott never thought would connect. And as Laci's family collapses under the weight of the news, the nation watches one man, stable, clean-shaven, polite Scott Peterson. A man who should be shattered. Standing calm, collected, and dry-eyed. Almost like a man who already knew that this discovery was coming. The moment the bodies surface, Scott Peterson changes. He stops cooperating. Stops answering questions. Stops pretending he's hopeful. Detectives can feel it, the panic settling into his bones. Within days, Scott quietly packs his car with survival gear. 2 driver's licenses. His brother's ID. A dozen changes of clothes. Camping equipment. And $15,000 in cash. But the strangest part? When they finally locate him, Scott isn't hiding in another state. He's sitting outside a golf course. With his hair bleached orange blonde. Looking nothing like the clean-cut husband the world recognized. Police ask where he's going. He says he's meeting his family. He says he's not running. He says it's all a misunderstanding. But there's one more detail investigators can't ignore. Scott's car is heading toward the Mexican border. Slowly. Quietly. like a man who knows the window is closing. Detectives don't wait another second. They arrest him on the spot. And for the first time since Christmas Eve, the story stops being a mystery and starts becoming a murder case. The trial of Scott Peterson becomes a national obsession, not because the evidence is flashy, but because the man at the center of it is a puzzle no one can solve. He walks into the courtroom calm, polite, and perfectly dressed. He smiles at reporters. He nods to his family. He looks normal. Too normal. Prosecutors paint him as a man living a double life. The charming husband on one side. And on the other, a man desperate for freedom from marriage, responsibility, and fatherhood. They lay out the timeline. The lies. The phone calls to Amber Fry. The boat trip on Christmas Eve. The exact spot where Laci's and Connor's bodies washed up. The hair found in Scott's pliers. The concrete dust in his warehouse. Piece by piece, they build a picture of a man who wanted a clean slate. But the defense fights back hard. They say there's no direct evidence. No eyewitness. No murder weapon. No cause of death. They claim Laci was kidnapped. They hint at unknown intruders. They insist the case is built on suspicion, not proof. And the jury sits frozen between two versions of the same man. Scott Peterson, the dedicated husband. Or Scott Peterson, the perfect liar. Amber Fry takes the stand, trembling but steady. She plays recorded phone calls. The courtroom hears Scott flirt, whisper, seduce. All while the world search for his pregnant wife. Every word lands like a knife. By the end, jurors aren't asking whether Scott killed Laci. They're asking how long he planned it. After months of testimony, cross-examinations, and endless media coverage, the jury finally returns. The courtroom is silent, not the normal silence, but the kind that feels heavy, like the air itself is waiting. Scott Peterson stands. No tremble. No fear. Just that same unreadable calm he has worn since the beginning. The foreman reads the decision. Guilty of first-degree murder for Laci Peterson. Guilty of second-degree murder for unborn baby Connor. A gasp ripples through the room. Some jurors wipe their eyes. Others stare straight ahead, as if trying not to think about the brutality behind those words. But the loudest reaction comes from Laci's mother. A cry that breaks open years of grief. A sound no mother should ever make. A sound that tells the whole story without a single word. Scott doesn't flinch. Not when the sentence is read. Not when the cameras swing toward his face. Not when the world labels him a monster. His expression stays flat. The kind of emptiness that scares people more than anger ever could. Because guilt, innocence, remorse, all of it seems to slide right off him. And that's the moment America realizes. Whether Scott Peterson murdered his wife or not, he will never be the husband people thought he was. Scott Peterson is sent to San Quentin State Prison, one of the hardest, most unforgiving places in America. A concrete island of murderers, lifers, and men waiting to die. Most inmates break. Most show fear, guilt, anger, something. But Scott? He adjusts. He plays basketball. He reads. He works out. He keeps his hair neat, his voice calm, his posture perfect. Like a man attending a business retreat instead of serving a death sentence. He files appeal after appeal. He claims he's innocent. His lawyers insist the investigation was flawed, the media poisoned the jury, the evidence was circumstantial. Outside the prison walls, people take sides. Some say Scott is a cold, calculating sociopath. A man who traded his pregnant wife for a fantasy life with another woman. A man who planned murder with the same flat calm he showed in court. Others insist he was framed by a sloppy investigation. That no murder weapon means no proof. That the bay is unpredictable, and anyone could have dumped those bodies. But inside San Quentin, debates don't matter. Only time does. And Scott Peterson, the husband who turned Christmas into a nationwide nightmare, is still waiting, still watching, still living a life suspended between guilt and innocence. A life where the truth remains twisted in silence. Because the one person who could answer everything will never speak again. Years pass, but the Peterson case refuses to fade. Every documentary, every podcast, every new interview pulls the story back into the spotlight. Because people don't just want to know what happened. They want to know why. Why would a man with money, looks, and a seemingly perfect life destroy everything? Why choose murder over divorce? Why kill a woman who trusted him, and a child who hadn't even taken a breath? The case stays alive because the questions stay alive. Laci's family continues to fight. Amber Fry tries to rebuild her life. Scott's supporters claim new evidence will clear him someday. But the truth is this. Every time Christmas lights go up in Modesto, people remember the young woman who never made it home, and the husband who told one too many lies. In the end, the Scott Peterson case is more than a crime story. It's a mirror. A reminder that monsters don't always hide in shadows or creep through windows. Sometimes they smile in family photos, kiss you goodnight, and tell the world they're praying for your safe return. Laci Peterson's story became a national tragedy not just because of what happened to her, but because of who was standing beside her the whole time. A husband the world thought it understood. A marriage that looked perfect from the outside. A disappearance that turned Christmas into a nightmare. And a truth that still leaves a cold trail behind it. Sometimes the person you fear most is the person you think you know best. Fade out.